So this is another absolute and comparative advantage example. So we're going to start with our absolute first. And absolute is just who would win. So if we're looking at who can produce the most bikes, we're comparing Fred's 450 to James's 600, which means James has absolute in bikes. We're looking at cars, then we're looking at Fred's 600 to James's 1200, which means that again, James has absolute advantage in cars. Comparative advantage requires comparing the opportunity costs, which is when we have to set up our ratios. So we're going to be looking at Fred first. And we are comparing Fred's 450 bikes to 600 cars. Those are the two options that Fred can make. If he devotes all of his resources, he can make 450 bikes, or he can make 600 cars. So if he chooses to produce bikes, he is giving up the opportunity to produce 600 cars in exchange for producing those 450 bikes. He can't produce both. He only has 24 hours in the day, 7 days a week. He has to choose between the two. And when he does that, he's going to find that the opportunity cost of producing a bike is 4/3 of a car. Or if you're someone who doesn't really like fractions, 1.3 repeating. So the opportunity cost of one bike is 4/3 of a car. If he were to devote all of his time and all of his resources to producing cars, he would be giving up the opportunity to produce 450 bikes in exchange for producing 600 cars, which is 3/4 or 0.75. So the opportunity cost of one car is 3/4 of a bike. Then we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it for James. So James can either produce 600 bikes or 1,200 cars. If he devotes all of his resources to producing bikes, then he is giving up the opportunity to produce 1,200 cars in exchange for producing those 600 bikes. And 1,200 divided by 600 gives us 2. So the opportunity cost of one bike is 2 cars. If he devotes all of his resources to producing cars, then he is giving up the opportunity to produce 600 bikes in exchange for producing 1,200 cars. And 600 divided by 1,200 gives you 1/2 or 0.5. So the opportunity cost of one car is 1/2 of a bike. And comparative advantage means that we are producing with the lowest opportunity cost. We're specializing in the good in which we have to give up the least. So we're going to be comparing the opportunity cost of Fred producing bikes, which we said was 1.33, and the opportunity cost of James producing bikes, which we said was 2. So since 1.3 repeating is less than 2, that means that Fred should produce bikes, because he has comparative advantage in producing bikes. And I'm just abbreviating for the sake of space and time. We're going to do the same thing, and we're going to look at the opportunity cost of our cars. And we have 0.75 and 0.5. And since 0.5 is smaller than 0.75, we know that James should produce cars because that's where he has his comparative advantage. So we're going to use this information, and we're going to do a brief example about what if they traded bikes and cars between the two of them. So we know that Fred is going to be producing bikes and James is going to be producing cars, which means this number no longer exists and this number no longer exists. Our problem says suppose that Fred is making 150 bikes and 200 cars before specialization, so 150 and 200, while James was making 200 bikes and 600 cars before specialization. How many more cars and bikes can be produced if they specialize and trade? So I just want to know how many more cars and bikes exist in the world after they specialize. So to do that, we need to see what's in the world of Fred and James before they specialize. So 150 bikes plus 200 bikes is 350 bikes. 200 cars plus 600 cars is going to be 800 cars. And we know that when they're specializing, that there is going to be 450 bikes and 1,200 cars after they specialize. So we just want to calculate the difference. So the difference in bikes is the difference between 450 and 350. So there's now 100 additional bikes. Same thing with cars. The difference between 1,200 cars and 800 cars is 400 cars. So by specializing and trading between them, there's 100 additional bikes in the world and 400 additional cars in the world. And remember that when we're looking at these types of problems, our world is only these two people with these two products.